Like Lips, Like Skins, which she will read from today, tells the story of a young art student who moved to the East Village of early 1980s, only to leave everything behind for Europe a few years into the new decade. Crossing the continent from Britain to East Germany, Felice arrives in West Berlin, where she meets a young journalist in exile from the GDR. Deeply marked by his years in juvenile detention facility, Micah struggles to function in what is, for him, a foreign political system. 13 years later, her relationship in crisis and Micah's hold on reality slipping away, Felice returns to New York to mount an exhibition of her artwork and to visit her aging mother. Haunted and unable to shake off the past, she finds her deceased father's journals, the only existing record of the main events in the life of the family, and decides to take them back with her to Berlin.
It should be possible, I told myself, to spend a few days in my mother's company without succumbing to the power of the past. It was a matter of exercising the will. Picture an invisible cocoon around you, a force field, Misha said, his fingers splayed like starbursts to other side of his face. But I've never been any good at this type of exercise. I become a lightning rod for the very things I'm supposed to be warding off. I yank the pillow out from under my cheek and turn it over to the cool side. Although she keeps the volume dialed down low, I can still hear the tinny transistor voices through the thin sheetrock wall from the radio my mother takes to bed each night, like the alarm clock we used to wrap in a towel and tuck under the dog's blanket when he was still a puppy, to simulate his mother's heartbeat and lull him to sleep. The radio is tuned to her favorite talk radio station. Agitated voices, urgent voices calling in from who knows where with a bone to pick or a cause to champion, or some crazy notion that's taken hold of them with a firm grip and won't let go. I check my watch on the bedside table and see that it's early morning. Groggy with jet lag, I sit up and gather my bearings. The floorboards upstairs are creaking. There are tenants in the house now, but when we were growing up, Delphine, Lily, Alfie, and our grandparents lived upstairs and our lives took place in a different geography. Last night, when I closed the hallway door, my hand lingered on the knob, fingering an old feeling from when the door was always left ajar, before the house was divided into private space and hallway space, tenant traffic space, and upstairs and downstairs were connected by the staircase Alfie and I used to slither down belly-wise like serpents. In the hallway, Lily and Delphine retreated to talk on the telephone in private, pulling the cord to crouch on the 5th step up, because the 5th step was the farthest the phone cord could reach, and whisper secrets behind the hallway door. Don't tie up the line, I hear my father saying, and there was the unspoken implication that someone could be trying to get through with urgent news. That terrible news could arrive at any time. Snap out of it, Misha would say. You have a show to put up, things to do, but the pull of the past is too strong, and the house is as familiar to me as my own skin. It knows me, recognizes me, but it also casts its spell over me. And it's as though I've gone back in time to find my 9-year-old self waiting at the side of the road. Is this what happens to people who leave? Blinking, I look around at what used to be my parents' room. It seemed so huge when I was a child. And here was the bed that my mother left one day to spend her nights lying on the living room carpet, unable to sleep and struggling to her feet every so often to get something out of the refrigerator. The bed took up most of the room, and Alfie and I used to jump up and down on it, trying to get a swat at the ceiling, and all at once I see the two of us jumping, and little Alfie laughing and jumping. Our limp arms are flopping around us like rag dolls. We're giggling and working ourselves into a frenzy. Alfie is getting wilder. He isn't jumping in one spot anymore, but crazily, letting his head dangle to either side and screaming with glee. I vaguely foresee that we're going to get in trouble if I let Alfie go on like this, and then it all happens so quickly. Alfie hits the edge of the bed, pulling the blankets down with him. A scream cuts through the room, and suddenly there's bright red blood spurting everywhere. And then my mother and grandmother had to pin a wailing and writhing Alfie down while the doctor told him how lucky this little boy was not to have lost an eye, as he sewed up the cut, stitch by stitch, with his huge, curved needle. And I, horrified with guilt, stood looking on. Why am I so haunted by the past? Is it because I left home while Lily and Alfie and Delphine stayed and raised families in the onward march of the everyday, day by day, successively replaced what was with what is? Children's birthday parties and piano lessons and homework and dance recitals, the all-absorbing practical business of parenting, the is of daily life. Whereas my history here ended the day I boarded an airplane to London, a caesura that preserved the past in an unnaturally indelible way. It's all there, like a stack of cans on a shelf. Open one, and there's Delphine sitting on the bottom of the bunk bed in the room she shared with Lily, her hand smeared with blood from her stained jeans. And then the entire scene unfolds, and there I am sitting next to her, staring at her in horror and crying out, "Delphine, you're bleeding." She looked down uncomprehendingly, stole a quick glance at her boyfriend sitting next to her, and then her hand flew out and slapped me. I was 8 or 9 and didn't know any better, and Delphine, coping with the perils of high school and whether or not to tongue kiss, was mortified. I ran out of the room, my face stinging, and locked myself in the bathroom, crying at the injustice and the fear and at not knowing what I had done wrong, and Delphine the whole time pounding on the bathroom door to let her in. But I wanted nothing more to do with her and her bleeding, and I screamed back for her to leave me alone. And then my mother came, and the threat of punishment sobered me into cracking the door a crack to negotiate. But my mother forced the door in and yanked me out by my arm, and then she beat me all the way into the kitchen until I scrambled under the table and made a run for the outside hall as Delphine slipped into the bathroom and slammed the door behind her. Later, in the bedroom, I collapse on the edge of the bed and look down at the skin of my thighs, pale against the colorful diamond shapes of the Afghan beneath them. This is the blanket that once covered Alfie's bed, the blanket he and I used to play on, walking our fingers like little wrinkly-kneed men along the Afghan's pattern, 2 steps to the left, 2 to the right, imagining them marching on and on, zigzagging off into infinity. Picture that, Alfie, forever and ever without end, zig-zag, zig-zag, right off the edge of the blanket and through the walls of the house, and all the way down Tyson's Lane and Highland Boulevard. And then they zip past Dairy Queen to Newport Beach and off across the Atlantic Ocean until their endless path veers away from the curvature of the Earth and up into outer space, past Mars, past Saturn, on and on forever. And you and I will grow up and get married and have kids and get old, and they'll still be traveling out there somewhere far, far away, because that's what infinity is, Alfie. It goes on and on forever, without end. All at once I have to think of the pen holder my father always kept in his front shirt pocket. Next to it was a small roll of lottery tickets held together by a rubber band. He played the lottery every week, religiously, for years, always purchasing the same amount of draws, always filling in the same numbers. He was convinced that sooner or later, if he adhered to the same sequence, he would eventually have to win. He considered it to be a kind of mathematical inevitability. What numbers did he play, I wonder? Was it our birthdays that he jotted down each week? Or did they have to do with events in the life he'd led before us? Some lost link he was trying to tap back into, a blind stab at a better time. I study my father's bookshelves. I take out a book, leaf through it, and begin to read the sections highlighted in yellow marker. Whatever plane our consciousness may be acting in, both we and the things belonging to that plane are, for the time being, our only realities. Each of my father's books has a Walden Books at the Staten Island Mall receipt scotch taped to the inside back cover. I flip through the pages to check the date. November 15th, 1988, 1 year to the day before he died. As we rise in the scale of development, we perceive that during the stages through which we have passed, we mistook shadows for realities, and the upward progress of the ego is a series of progressive awakenings, each advance bringing with it the idea that now, at last, we have reached reality, but only when we shall have reached the absolute consciousness and blended our own with it shall we be free from the delusions produced by Maya. I gaze back at the shelf. Works on theosophy, reincarnation, string theory, black holes, all of them copiously highlighted in the first chapter or two, then less so, until the marks gradually cease altogether. To begin with, matter has extension, color, motion, taste, and smell, corresponding to the existing senses of man. And by the time that it fully develops the next characteristic, let us call it for the moment permeability, this will correspond to the next sense of man. Let us call it normal clairvoyance. I think of him lying in bed with his hearing aid, sitting on the table next to him, following the lines of text with a dayglow marker, and then drifting off to sleep soon afterwards, night after night, trying to piece together a world he had missed out on, and with so little life left to do it in. I put the book back, wedging it between a copy of the Reader's Digest and the Bhagavad Gita, and pull out another, a calendar diary from the year 1990, the year after my father died. He had prepared it ahead of time, written in all the various anniversaries and notable occurrences on their respective dates, with a small number in the upper right-hand corner indicating how many years previously the event had occurred. On January 25th, 1990, it would have been 4 years since the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded in mid-air. February 2nd would have marked 1 year since he'd purchased a queen-sized Elite Emerald mattress. March 30th, 3 years since he'd junked the Maverick. May 13th, 3 years since he'd unclogged the kitchen drain. Another category altogether. March 1st, 3 years since the Big K, my father's shorthand for the devastating news that his kidneys were steadily losing their ability to function. April 1st, 9 years since the Big H, or his first major heart attack. May 30th, 9 years since his triple bypass operation, which was largely unsuccessful. October 1st, 4 years since the Big S, the name he gave to the series of strokes he suffered in the years that followed. I glance up at the bookcase. There are 9 more of my father's journals sitting on the shelf. One by one, I pull them out, calendars and monthly planning books full of my father's lopsided, scraggly handwriting. I hold them in my hands for a moment, lift them to my lips, and then stash them away in my suitcase beneath a tangle of underwear and socks. I lie down on the bed and pull the blankets over me. Once again, the sound of the radio drifts in from my mother's bedroom. I don't know, Bud, you sound like a crackpot to me. Then, a voice too muffled to make out clearly. I squeeze my eyes shut and imagine the faces of the sweet Adelines. Am I right, Mike? Am I right? I strain not to listen. I concentrate instead on the women's expressions, removed from everyday reality, transported by music, existing in another world invisible to the world around them. Let's see if we can get another opinion on this, Bob. Anybody out there who's lost a loved one in a violent crime, the time to call in is now. Woven together in a group portrait, the Adelines are frozen in time, their mouths forever open, suspended in eternal song. It's hard, Mike, it's really hard, but I think what the Lord really wants us to do is forgive, and so that's what I personally try to focus on. The voices from the radio transform into music. It's the Adelines now, crooning, lulling me off to sleep with their eyes gazing softly into space and a heavenly half-smile playing about their lips. This is Vinny. I'm calling in from Westerly. Look, Mike, can you explain something here? How is it these animals deserve therapy? They go blow a hole in someone's head and you ask them about their childhood? They took away my tricycle? Nobody loved me? Give me a break, Mike. I think it's sick. Sick, you hear me? As the choir sends around me, the Adelines' lips are open and unmoving, their song mute. They look like angels, cherubs, and suddenly I see a choir of babies above me, their mouths agape, singing their silent song in unison. And then I'm asleep, and the radio drones on in my mother's room, and the voices continue to appeal to the night. Injured voices, atoning voices. And I can't know that a year and a half from now I will have a child of my own, or that Evie's son-in-law Jerry will kill her daughter Loretta with a single shot to the head in their two-car garage, or that my mother and Rose will have a minor car accident that Rose will never completely recover from, that she'll start growing batty bit by bit, and her daughter will pack her away into an old age home, and my mother, out of an innate terror in the face of anyone else's suffering but her own, will refuse to have anything to do with her ever again. Thank you. The quotes are from Madame Blavatsky, the Theosophist.